The forgotten tank tactic that changed modern warfare. Dawn breaks slowly across a fractured battlefield. The night's mist still clings to the valley, rolling over broken ridges like smoke from an old cannon. Somewhere beneath that haze, men wait in silence, their lives measured in seconds, their hopes pinned on the armored monsters crouching with them. A tank's turret creeps upward, its dark muzzle pointing towards the horizon like a predator's snout. The enemy across the valley has the numbers, has the missiles, has the drones circling above. But numbers mean little if you cannot see your target, and firepower means nothing if it cannot pierce the earth itself. The silence is broken by a single thunderclap as a 120mm APFSDS round leaves its chamber at nearly 1,700 meters per second, tearing through the morning air. In a flash, armor is shattered. Men are thrown against steel, ammunition ignites, and the valley is lit with flames. This is not simply the power of modern weaponry. It is the power of knowledge, the power of geometry, the power of a forgotten tank tactic that uses patience, terrain, and positioning to turn battles upside down. Long dismissed as outdated in an era of drones and precision missiles, this tactic has returned from the shadows to prove it still defines survival in the age of modern warfare. The tactic revealed: Defilade and reversed slope. At the heart of this forgotten tactic lies a simple but devastating truth. The less of your tank the enemy can see, the less of it he can kill. Commanders of old called it fighting in defilade, a method where only the turret, often the thickest armored part of the machine, peaks over the crest of a ridge while the vulnerable hull stays hidden behind earth. To refine it further, many employed the reverse slope, positioning their tanks on the far side of a ridge so that attackers could not even see them until they crested the hill themselves. When the tank shifts into a hull-down position, only the gun and the thick frontal turret are presented to the enemy, while the engine, ammunition racks, and side armor remain concealed. In practice, this means that a tank which might otherwise be a vulnerable target for a top attack missile or a long-range APFSDS shot now has seconds of safety bought by the hill. When the enemy is forced to climb the ridge, their hulls rise high, their weak lower plates exposed, and for those brief moments, sometimes no more than 5 to 20 seconds, they become open targets. In war, those seconds mean everything. The language of steel, weapons, and ammunition. To understand why this tactic matters, one must understand the terrifying power of modern tank armament. The most common weapon in the arsenals of NATO's armored forces today is the 120mm smoothbore cannon, a weapon capable of hurling a dart of depleted uranium or tungsten at speeds greater than a rifle bullet, nearly 1,650 to 1,750 meters per second. These are APFSDS rounds, armor-piercing fin stabilized discarding sabot. Each dart weighs between 4 and 10 kilograms, a slender rod designed to penetrate steel through sheer kinetic energy. At ranges of 2,000 meters, such rounds can punch through approximately 470 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor if they strike directly. But enemies have not relied only on armor to resist such firepower. They turned instead to HE warheads and top attack missiles, designed to strike at tanks where they are weakest. These missiles often descend in steep arcs, their explosive jets capable of cutting through hundreds of millimeters of armor equivalent. A single modern tandem charge missile, weighing barely 20 kilograms, can reduce a multi-million-dollar tank to a burning wreck in seconds. Yet every weapon has its weakness. A missile descending at 60 degrees loses much of its penetration as the jet disperses across sloped armor, sometimes by as much as 30 to 50%. A kinetic dart that might pierce half a meter of steel on flat ground may shatter uselessly against composite armor angled at 60 degrees. This is the science that the forgotten tactic exploits: the resurgence, technology, and its unintended weakness. Modern warfare seems dominated by satellites, drones, and sensors. Commanders speak of thermal optics, millimeter wave radars, and fully integrated battlefield networks that leave nothing hidden. But every eye has a blind spot, and every sensor has an angle it cannot see. When tanks take positions on reverse slopes, even a drone circling high struggles to reveal their exact silhouettes. Their heat signatures blend into the earth, their hulls vanish into the shadows of the ridge. The enemy knows they are there but does not know exactly where, and so the geometry of the battlefield forces them to climb. And that climb is fatal. As their tanks crest, they expose weak lower hulls no thicker than 70 to 100 millimeters, roofs as thin as 20 to 50 millimeters, and vulnerable rear compartments that no armor plate can truly shield. Defenders, whose turrets are braced behind hundreds of millimeters of sloped composite armor, aim at these fleeting silhouettes and fire. High-velocity 120 millimeters APFSDS rounds strike first, shredding engine blocks and igniting fuel lines. Secondary targets are hit with heat shells, detonating internal ammunition and sending fragments across the battlefield. Simultaneously, autocannons and guided missiles rain down on exposed tracks and optics, immobilizing vehicles and disrupting formations. Smoke, fire, and shrapnel obscure remaining targets, yet trained crews rapidly adjust, creating overlapping fields of fire. Even drones, forced into higher orbits to avoid debris, struggle to maintain visual contact, their infrared feeds disrupted by fire and dust. The result is a lethal choreography of destruction, where terrain, timing, and firepower converge to devastating effect. First is a case study in destruction. Imagine two armored companies facing each other across a valley. The attackers, with superior numbers and modern missiles, deploy on open ground, expecting their technology to dominate. The defenders, fewer in number, crawl into hull-down positions behind the far ridge. The distance between them is 1,500 meters. As the attackers advance, their thermal optics pick up only the faint outline of two turrets above the ridge. They launch a volley of top attack missiles. 3 warheads streak across the sky. The first explodes prematurely when an active protection system detonates it in midair. The second slams into the turret roof, but the angle of descent and the layered composite reduce its penetration. It gouges steel, sprays fragments, but does not kill the crew. The third missile overshoots, striking into the ridge behind. Then comes the defender's reply. A single 120mm APFSDS round screams across the valley. At a velocity of nearly 1,700 meters per second, it takes just over a second to cross the distance. It strikes the attacker's turret front, penetrates nearly half a meter of steel equivalent, and ignites the ammunition stored within. The explosion rips the turret from its ring, throwing 30 tons of steel into the air like a child's toy. Flames engulf the hull, ammunition cooks off, and secondary blasts echo like thunder. The attackers are shaken. Within half a minute, one of their tanks is destroyed, another crippled, and the initiative slips from their grasp. The sound and fury of battle. The noise of such engagements is not simply loud, it is overwhelming. The crack of a smoothbore cannon firing resonates like a god's hammer. The shell's sonic boom follows a heartbeat later. The impact against enemy steel is accompanied by a metallic shriek, the hiss of molten spall ricocheting inside the turret, and then the unmistakable roar of secondary explosions. Ammunition ignites with fireballs that erupt from open hatches, and engines howl as fuel lines burst. For defenders, those moments are the difference between life and death. By exposing only the turret and gun, they force the enemy's return fire to strike the most heavily protected sections. Even when a missile lands true, the thickness of 700 to 900 millimeters of RHA equivalent armor can stop it, buying enough time for the crew to reload and fire again. The geometry of numbers. The battlefield, in the end, becomes an equation of numbers and angles. The exposure window for an enemy cresting a ridge is no more than 5 to 20 seconds. In that brief interval, the defender's gunner must range, aim, and fire. Yet with modern fire control computers capable of ballistic calculations in less than a second, and with muzzle velocities over 1,600 meters per second, that interval is more than enough to guarantee a hit. Missile penetration at 60 degrees can fall by nearly half, dropping from 400 millimeters of equivalent RHA to barely 200. Armor plates that would fail on flat ground now shrug off the attack. Conversely, the defender's APFSDS round, fired into the thin roof or lower front plate of the cresting attacker, is devastating. Survivability rates climbed sharply when hull-down positions are used. In World War II, data showed tanks in Defilade were often twice as likely to survive initial engagements compared to those in open ground. Cold War tests reinforced the lesson, but in the rush toward high-tech warfare, commanders forgot the numbers. Now, once more, they prove true. Explosions that changed the outcome. One only needs to recall battles like the 73 Easting in the Gulf War. Iraqi T-72s, hidden in reversed slope positions, forced American M1 Abrams to fight within 300 to 500 meters, a range where modern 120mm APFCDS rounds could dominate yet still encounter unexpected resistance. The tactic could not save outdated tanks against advanced firepower, but it slowed the assault, disrupted armored formations numbering over 150 vehicles, and proved that the principle remained valid. Or recall the Valley of Tears in the Yom Kippur War, where Israeli Centurion and M60 tanks used terrain and defilade to survive against overwhelming Syrian numbers, holding their line despite being outnumbered almost 10-1. Explosions from high-explosive anti-tank shells and 155mm artillery barrages tore through columns, while the precision of Israeli gunners ensured each shot counted. These moments are reminders that explosions on the battlefield are not simply the result of superior weapons, but of superior placement. A single tank, correctly positioned, can destroy multiple enemies before being forced to withdraw. A lone T-55 in a well-chosen defilade could disable 3 or 4 advancing vehicles before detection, while indirect fire from mortar batteries minus 120 rounds per minute could break a formation's cohesion. Even terrain features like ridgelines, wadis, and urban rubble multiplied the effects of heat and APFSDS impacts, making a small defensive force exponentially more lethal. The return of the forgotten. For years, the doctrine of open maneuver and long-range fire seemed to bury this tactic in history books. But the rise of drones, missiles, and top attack systems paradoxically revived it. By hugging the terrain, by using Earth itself as armor, tanks once again find survival. The forgotten has become essential. And so, across modern conflicts, you find ridges lined with turret silhouettes, waiting. You find missiles that fail, shells that bounce, explosions that shake the hillsides but leave defenders alive. You find geometry deciding battles as much as steel, the secret that still lies. This forgotten tactic is not glamorous. It does not involve swarms of drones or the shimmer of satellites. It is slow, patient, almost boring until the moment it explodes into violence. But in the crucible of war, it has saved lives, turned battles, and reshaped the future of armored warfare. When tanks crouch in silence behind ridges, when their turrets alone catch the dawn's light, when their crews wait for the enemy to rise and expose their weak hearts, then the old lessons of defilade, reverse slope, and hull-down roar back to life. In those seconds, war is reduced to numbers, penetration versus thickness, angle versus trajectory, seconds versus survival. And when the cannon fires, when flames erupt and steel twists, the forgotten becomes unforgettable. As the smoke drifts across the ridge and the echoes of cannon fire fade, the battlefield falls into a tense, almost eerie silence, every second stretching like a heartbeat, each shadow a potential threat, each turret a promise of destruction. This is the power of the forgotten tactics, patience, geometry, and terrain turning seconds into survival and a ridge into a weapon. If this glimpse into armored warfare keeps your heart racing, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell button to watch the upcoming next video, where silent, deadly drones are quietly rewriting modern war zones in ways you've never imagined.